All right, so are you ready to dive into some serious allegations against Sean Diddy Combs? We've got legal documents and news articles and expert commentary, and, well, it's a lot.
It really is, and it's a story that, we need to handle this carefully. We're talking about sexual assault and, and recent development with Jay-Z, so we need to approach this with sensitivity.
Absolutely. It's a sensitive topic, for sure.
Yeah.
We're talking over 20 lawsuits here spanning decades.
Yeah.
And it's all detailed in this recent Forbes article.
Yeah.
The sheer volume is pretty staggering.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And to really grasp what's going on, I think a good place to start would be with the most recent development. That's that lawsuit that was updated December 8th.
Okay.
This was originally filed back in October by a woman who was alleging that she was raped when she was 13 years old at an MTV Video Music Awards afterparty.
Wow.
Back in 2000. Initially, it named Combs and this unnamed male celebrity. Now it's been updated to specifically accuse Jay-Z as that unnamed individual.
Wow, that's huge. So how has Jay-Z responded to this?
He's denied any involvement, and he's called the allegations idiotic. He's even gone so far as to accuse the attorney representing the accusers, Tony Buzbee, of blackmail.
Oh, wow.
In an attempt to force a settlement.
So right out of the gate, we've got some serious accusations and some strong denials. But I think before we get too deep into the specifics of all of this, we should take a step back and understand the legal landscape. We're talking about civil lawsuits here, not criminal charges, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very important distinction. No criminal charges have been filed against either Combs or Jay-Z as of right now. And it's really important to remember that, in this country, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
However, the volume and the consistency of these accusations against Combs, it does raise some questions.
It does. So what's the difference between a criminal charge and a civil suit?
So basically, a criminal case is brought by the government, and the goal is to punish the defendant for a crime. The burden of proof is incredibly high.
Yeah.
The prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
It's a very high bar to clear.
Very high. Now, a civil case like the ones we're discussing here, the case is brought by an individual or sometimes a group of individuals who are seeking compensation for damages they claim to have suffered.
Okay.
The standard of proof is lower. It's called a preponderance of evidence, which basically means the plaintiff just has to show it's more likely than not that the defendant is responsible for the harm.
So different playing field, different rules.
Different consequences, exactly. And this is why sometimes you see cases where somebody isn't found guilty in a criminal court, but then they're found liable in a civil court for the same actions.
That makes sense. So let's go back to these lawsuits against Combs. We've got this recent update involving Jay-Z, but there are over 20 others spanning decades.
Yeah.
So can you give us a sense of just the scope and the types of accusations being made here?
Sure. To understand the full picture, we should really go back in time. One lawsuit alleges that Combs assaulted a woman at a Biggie Smalls party back in 1995, slamming her head into a wall and then raping her. Then you get an accuser from 2008 who claims he was forced to perform oral sex on Combs in a Macy's stockroom.
What?
He even alleged that Combs threatened him with a gun.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah. And then in 2022, there are multiple lawsuits detailing alleged assaults at parties. Often these involve claims of drinks being drugged. So it's a pretty disturbingly consistent pattern.
It really is. The alleged use of drug drinks is very alarming.
Yeah.
Multiple accusers describe being given drinks that were laced with drugs, and this, caused them to lose control of their motor functions and be unable to consent.
Right. And, if these claims are true, it points to a deliberate attempt to violate these individuals.
Yeah.
One lawsuit filed by a woman in Arizona describes an alleged assault at one of Combs' infamous Las Vegas parties back in 2014. She says she was given drinks laced with drugs, and it caused her to lose control of her motor functions, and then he raped her.
So we've got this pattern of alleged behavior stretching back years with some striking similarities. And then there's this other element to the story that I find fascinating. This lawyer, Tony Buzbee, representing these accusers. This guy's making some bold moves.
He is. Buzbee is definitely a high-profile attorney. He's got a history of taking on powerful figures, and he's not afraid to use aggressive legal tactics. In this case, he's representing over 100 accusers, which is a staggering number. And he's filed many of these lawsuits anonymously, which is unusual, but clearly part of a strategic approach.
Okay, so break this down for us. Why would accusers want to remain anonymous, and what are the legal implications of that?
There are a few reasons why an accuser might choose to remain anonymous, particularly in a case involving a powerful figure. First, there's the fear of retaliation. These individuals may worry about damage to their careers or their reputations or even their personal safety if they come forward publicly. Then you have the emotional toll of reliving a very traumatic experience. Coming forward publicly with something like this can be incredibly difficult and re-traumatizing.
So it's about protecting themselves.
It's exactly, physically and emotionally. But the catch here is that the legal system is designed to be transparent. And in this case, a federal judge has ruled that at least one of these accusers is going to have to reveal her identity if she wants to proceed with her case.
It's a tough spot to be in. They want justice, but they also want to protect themselves.
Right. And it raises some difficult questions about how we can best balance the rights of the accused with the needs of the accusers, especially in a situation involving sensitive matters like sexual assault.
This is getting pretty complex, and we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack here, from the specifics of these lawsuits to the legal strategies being used and the potential implications for both Cr0wn and the individuals accusing him. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to dig deeper into all of this.
Yeah, it gets complicated quickly. And when you consider how much is at stake both for Cr0wn and the people accusing him, it's no surprise that both sides are lawyering up big time.
Well, and speaking of lawyering up, you mentioned that Buzbee is representing over 100 accusers. That's a huge number. What's a strategy there? Is he just trying to flood the system with lawsuits?
It's a very aggressive tactic, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it seems to be about more than just winning individual cases, I think. By filing so many lawsuits, and particularly by using these anonymous lawsuits, he's creating this wave of bad press that's really hard to ignore. It puts Cr0wn under a ton of pressure, and it sort of paints this picture of a pattern of behavior even before any of these cases actually go to trial.
So it's almost like a PR move as much as a legal one.
Exactly. It's about controlling the narrative. And it can be a really effective strategy, especially when you're going up against someone as high profile as Cr0wn.
But it's not without its risks, right? I mean, we talked about that judge's ruling that at least one of the accusers has to reveal her identity if she wants her case to move forward. That could scare off other accusers from coming forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a tough situation. On the one hand, you want to create an environment where victims feel safe coming forward and seeking justice. But on the other hand, you have to protect their identities and ensure their safety. And let's be real, going up against someone like Diddy takes guts. He's got money connections, a whole team of lawyers ready to defend him.
And that makes me think about something you mentioned before, the whole power dynamic here. We're talking about Sean Diddy, Cr0wn, a music mogul with a massive fortune, a global brand. Going up against someone like that, even in court, must feel incredibly daunting.
You're right. And a lot of these lawsuits reflect that. Several accusers talk about feeling powerless, intimidated, and afraid to speak out against someone with Cr0wn's level of influence. Like, there's this lawsuit from 2006 involving a man who worked security at a party, and he says he was pressured into drinking what he believes was a drug drink, and then Cr0wn assaulted him. He felt like he couldn't resist because of Cr0wn's power and status.
That's a really disturbing example of how power can be used to silence victims and create a culture of complicity. And it's a theme that we've heard a lot in recent years, especially in the context of the #MeToo movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This case, while it is unique, also kind of reflects these bigger societal conversations about power, consent, and accountability. It forces us to look at how institutions and systems can perpetuate these power imbalances and protect the people in charge.
So it's not just a legal battle, it's a cultural one too.
Exactly. It's about challenging the norms and changing the conversation. And it's about holding people in positions of power accountable for their actions, regardless of their status or wealth.
Okay, so we've talked about power dynamics and legal strategy, but I want to go back to the specifics of these accusations for a second. Some of these recurring details really stand out, especially the claims about drug drinks.
Yeah, that detail pops up in multiple lawsuits, and it's a disturbing one. It suggests that there was premeditation, a deliberate attempt to incapacitate these victims and make them vulnerable to assault.
And it's not only women making these accusations either.
Right.
There are men who have come forward as well. There's one guy from California who says Cr0wn groped him at a Ciroc vodka launch party back in 2022. And then there's another man who alleges that he was drugged and sexually assaulted by Cr0wn when he was only 10 years old during a trip to LA.
Right. And the fact that you have all these different accusers from all different backgrounds and the alleged assaults happen under such different circumstances, well, it makes it harder to just brush this off as a he said, she said situation. The consistency of certain details, particularly the claims of drug drinks and the sheer number of people coming forward, really creates a very compelling picture.
It's a very different image of Cr0wn than what we see in the media.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder how much we as a culture are willing to overlook when it comes to celebrities. Do we just turn a blind eye to these red flags because we're so caught up in the allure of fame and fortune?
It's an uncomfortable question, but it's an important one.
Absolutely. And this case, with all its layers, forces us to face these hard truths. It challenges us to look at our own biases, our understanding of power, and the ways in which we contribute to a culture that allows abuse to happen.
So we've got these extremely serious accusations, denials from both Combs and Jay-Z, an aggressive legal strategy from Buzbee, and this whole cultural backdrop of power, consent, and accountability. So where do we go from here? What are the possible outcomes legally and culturally? It's a lot to think about for sure. So from a legal standpoint, what could happen here? What are the potential outcomes if Combs or Jay-Z are found liable in these civil cases?
Well, the first thing would probably be financial penalties.
Yeah.
They could be ordered to pay a lot of money in damages,
Yeah.
potentially millions of dollars depending on the specifics of each case and what the juries decide.
And then you've got the damage to their reputations, which is already substantial. I mean, these allegations are already having an impact regardless of how the legal cases turn out.
Absolutely. And that reputational damage is hard to measure. It could affect their brands, their business deals, their standing in the industry.
Right. Makes you think about the legal strategies being used here. We talked about Buzbee's approach, filing all these lawsuits, many of them anonymously. What about Combs and Jay-Z? What are their lawyers likely to do?
Well, they've already come out with strong denials saying they didn't do anything wrong. I imagine their lawyers will try to discredit the accusers, point out inconsistencies in their stories, and really emphasize that there haven't been any criminal charges.
Yeah.
They'll probably argue that these lawsuits are just people trying to get money from rich guys.
So it's going to be a battle of who has the better story as much as a legal fight.
Exactly. Public opinion matters a lot in cases like this.
Which brings us back to that question of how do we as a society deal with these situations where there are very serious accusations but no criminal charges? How do we balance the idea of innocent until proven guilty with the need to hold powerful people accountable?
It's a tough question without easy answers. But I think it starts with talking openly and honestly about power consent and holding people accountable. We need to listen to survivors believe their stories and create an environment where they feel safe to come forward.
And it goes beyond Hollywood or the music industry. These are issues that exist everywhere.
You're absolutely right. This case, with all its complexities, lets us look at these wider societal issues. It's a chance to reflect on our own biases, challenge our assumptions, and work towards making the world a fairer place for everyone.
So we've spent this deep dive looking into the allegations against Sean Combs, and I have to admit I'm left with more questions than answers. It's a messy situation, and there's a lot we still don't know.
That's okay. Sometimes it's more important to ask the right questions than to have all the answers. What matters is that we keep talking about these issues, asking tough questions, and demanding that people in power are held accountable.
You know, when we started this deep dive, I asked if fame and power corrupt people, or just make them more of who they already are. I don't know if we've answered that question, but we've definitely learned a lot about how complicated it all is.
I agree. And sometimes just asking the right questions is more valuable than having all the answers.
Yeah.
This case, with all its ups and downs, encourages us to keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep working towards a better world.
Well said. And to our listeners, we encourage you to do the same. Keep following this story as it unfolds. Stay informed, stay engaged, and use this case to have deeper conversations about power, accountability, and justice, because those are the conversations that can really make a difference.